behind it because it's the light shining on the windows, but it's stunningly beautiful where we are. The city we all love, St James's Park, over my left shoulder somewhere, but you probably can't see it from this window. We just thought we'd give you something different this week, something to keep you going, knowing that there was a week or so between videos. We didn't want to leave everybody hanging with nothing to listen to on your dog walks or nothing to listen to on your TV. A little spare few minutes when you've got the kids to bed. I don't know how you watch this. We thought we'd do something different though, rather than just us waffling as we normally do about anything and everything. Well, me normally. We put the question out from our St James's Park video on Saturday, asking you guys what you thought the type of content we should do. And at random, we've chosen out of the comments somebody who put together probably the most coherent set of questions that I've seen, much more coherent than any plan, we don't do any, that we ever have for a Geordie Journals video. So big thanks to @Steve1887. This is your show. These are the questions that you've asked that you'd like us to answer. This maybe is a little bit of a precursor to the type of thing we're going to maybe introduce next season, where we do some midweek Q&As with, might be one of them, might be two, or might be three, will depend on how many can make it on any particular night. But that could even form part of the membership thing we've been talking about as well. But I'll jump straight in, lads, unless you've got anything that you want to particularly shout about before we go into the questions.
No, let's get into it.
Come on. Let's do it.
Unscripted as usual.
Just these guys don't know what the questions are, by the way.
No,
so unless you've read the comments.
I remember a comment, but I can't remember the specifics.
I know there's lots of questions and I can't remember all the questions, so...
Well, I'm normally quite quick to fire in those comments, so they'll probably drop off your feed.
Yeah. Cheers, lads.
Yeah, it is. I like to let the people know I'm interested in their comments. Right, so the question from Steve1887 was, he said, can you guys do a video on the transfer window? Now, some of it's most of it's transfer window related, but I think there's some broader topics in this set of questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions, I think. There's plenty to get with talking. And I think whether we were able to answer those questions, whether we're not, there'll be a good talk, and it'd be interesting to know what you guys think in the comments of Steve's questions and our answers as well. So what I'll say before we jump into those questions is, I know we do this drill at the end, but it's really important that you guys give it a like. We've taken our time out during the week to do this Q&A. Show a bit of support, spread the joy, help the algorithms, and get more people to watch the Geordie Journals. That's what we're all here for. So give it a like, give it a share, and of course, you know what to do. Click the bell and subscribe. First question, Steve1887. Thanks, mate. Right. So the players in the squad, who do you think will be sold and released this summer? Jordan.
So
let's start with the first one. So there is a question further on about contracts, so we don't have to go into too much detail about maybe the release type of thing. But I think we're probably all in a reasonable agreement on the type of players that will be released. But so to talk about that, and then it's got to be the sales, if any.
So we're talking about contracts first.
Quickly on contracts, because there is a question later on, but then...
Well, there's 4 players left, senior players in the current squad. Dummett, Gillespie, Carriers, and Ritchie. So,
do you think any of them...
Gillespie?
Let's quickly wrap it up between the two. Do you think any of those 4 will still be here next season, Dom?
Mark Gillespie will be.
Mark Gillespie will be, yeah. And I think the rest will go, yeah. Obvious reasons, really. If we want to go into it now, I shall wait.
I feel like we'll have to.
Just go into it.
Yeah.
Well, right, so the last question was what will happen to Dummett and Ritchie after Gillespie's contract extension. So the Gillespie stuff's out there. For me, it's a relatively easy deal to do in terms of the guy absolutely breathes and bleeds black and white. He's happy doing what he's doing. He's a number 3 goalkeeper. You look around the Premier League, you see the levels of number 3 goalkeepers, they are of a certain standard. Look, Gillespie's in that mix, and that's fine. No, even Manchester City have Scott Carson, who's touching 40 and probably hasn't kicked the ball for about 4 years.
Since he played Tinder as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. He did, yeah.
The lockdown game.
And before that, it was probably 2 years before that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Gillespie thing was kind of makes sense if you let Karius go and if Dubravka, there's a question mark over his head as well. So Sales then.
Sales. Well, for me, I've always said that, there's constant talk of Bruno, Isaac, whatever, being a big money sales, but for me, the one that unlocks the transfer window for Newcastle this summer is Miguel Almiron to Saudi Arabia, because there was interest there in January, as reported by yourself, Liam.
Yeah.
Interest from Saudi Pro League clubs.
That deal, so let's just be clear on this, I don't know if we've ever gone into detail on this video, that there was paperwork passed around.
Yeah.
That deal was from a negotiation perspective between clubs was done. And I think it's very much, then you can join the dots yourself and say that it was very much a player thing.
Yeah.
That he didn't roll back the years there, didn't he? When I said join the dots.
Got flashbacks there.
Back to flashbacks to NFC matters there. Join the
There'll be
dots.
loads of people that remember that. There'll be people that
yeah,
passed on generations from Liam Kennedy to Geordie Jones and follow you.
Maybe.
But yeah, I think for me, Almiron holds the key, because the interest from Saudi will undoubtedly still be there this summer. So the fee, I'm not 100% certain, but rumour at the time was around 30 million. If you can get anywhere close to that, even if you dropped down to 20 million, still.
Yeah, I think it was a bit less. I think it was closer to 20 and 30.
But even if you get anywhere near that kind of fee, that is a big fee for a player who is entering the, I don't want to say twilight years, but he is hitting his 30s, which naturally in football you get closer to that retirement age. We've all spoken, I think, openly that the right hand side of that Newcastle United attack could be improved. So for me, I think if you're looking at players in that squad with value, Almiron is the obvious one, in my opinion.
Don, where do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Where do you think? I was going to throw a different player out there for your assessment. Where do you think Sean Longstaff falls into that category? Because there's a lot of talk about interest.
Yeah, he's obviously a player Eddie Howe does like, and he's shown faith in, and Sean Longstaff's played through injury for the majority of the season, and has to be said, his form has dipped, but at the start of the season he was probably your player of the season, Liam, so like in the opening months of the campaign, so he has an important role. But the thing with Sean Longstaff is, and it's probably one of the issues a lot of people have with financial fair play PSR, is it almost encourages you to sell the players you produced through the academy, because it would represent pure profit. So a sale of Sean Longstaff, if you can get 15-20 million for him, it would, in the same way Miguel Almiron would, but to a probably higher degree, because it is pure profit, would unlock Newcastle's spending. And when you look at the midfield, the emergence of Lewis Miley, the return of Sandro Tonali, Elliot Anderson's come into the frame in recent months as well. Sean Longstaff, although Eddie Howe may see him as having an important role, I think Sean Longstaff could be sort of squeezed out slightly, and if a club, maybe a newly promoted club or side lower down the Premier League, would come in with a sort of 15-20 million offer, I think personally I would snap the hands off, because it would represent pure profit. And Newcastle, at the moment, would Sean Longstaff get in Newcastle's strongest 11 with everyone fit? I'd say probably wouldn't, although earlier in the season he may well have.
I think he still does.
Do you?
And that's not me having any kind of blinkers on. I'm just thinking of the way Eddie Howe plays. I've said this to Jordan many times off camera. I think Joe Linton's best position, maybe we did it on here, Joe Linton's best position is the left hand side, and I do have a sense that he might have been keen to use that at times this season, as Joe Linton as a left forward, Gordon as a right forward, and Isak through the middle, with Tonali, Longstaff and Bruno as your midfield three in any way, shape or form. But I think he was willing to use Barnes at any one point. I think Longstaff would never be one of, as Bobby Robson would say, your blue chip players in your team, would he? He wouldn't be a Bruno, he wouldn't be an Isak, he wouldn't be a Gordon. But I think he would have got a fair few games this season even with full strength. I just remember back to the problems that the midfield had at the start of the season. I think it's easily forgotten that Tonali was brought in looked like a lad who really was struggling at times to acclimate. I know there's people might not like what I'm saying, but to me, this is only my opinion. Looked like a lad who was struggling to acclimatise to the rigours of Premier League football in those first 7-8 games that he played. And the midfield was improved when Sean Longstaff was brought back in, because he brought that legs, he brought the ability to tackle, which he seems to have lost as the season's gone on. Belly puts a tackle in now, which was one of the real things that made him stand out at the start of the season. I think he's a player that, if an offer comes in, they could be interested to sell, but I don't think they're necessarily will be top of the list to sell. I think there's a few players fall in that category. I think you could probably put Kieran Trippier in that category. You might want to say something on that as well, do you? No. You could put Jacob Murphy into that category, I would think. Don't know if you noticed the lights. The lights going out a little bit there. So, do you know what? We're up in, so anybody who doesn't know, Pilgrim Street, Cubo, I think this was one of the developments of the Reuben brothers, wasn't it? That we have a little hot desking up the top here, and we can use offices and things like that. I was speaking to the people, and they said they think there's a ghost here. Now, my suggestion was, I don't know what a ghost was doing all the way up here.
Well, to be fair, the music's playing. I wonder if the ghost is dancing at some point.
Well, he won't be dancing because the sensors
Right,
have gone off.
of course, yeah. How silly of me.
Yeah, so what they said to me was, be careful when you come at night, because you do hear and see things that go on, quite spooky. So apologies if there's any ghouls or ghostly interactions with this video, but it's better than me not charging the phone and the whole thing going off, which I don't think is going to happen tonight. Right.
What were you saying about not waffling? We're talking about ghosts.
Well, I think people like that.
The viewers want this. If there's something floating in the background there, I know what it is.
Right. I don't know, have we gone all the way through that? Yeah, probably have. Right.
Yeah.
Have we?
Rest
of the squad, Callum Wilson could be one.
Callum Wilson, I thought, was a big one, because he was another one linked in January, will have interest again in the summer. He's 33 next season, has a year left on his contract. Eddie Howe, the way I judge it is, Eddie Howe was so adamant of Joe Linton's new contract being a top priority, it almost suggested that if Newcastle weren't to agree deals with Kieran Trippier, Callum Wilson, Sean Longstaff, 3 players out of contract next summer, it's almost an indicator that Newcastle may look to sell them, because Eddie Howe said, in a world of PSR, we cannot afford to lose any players on a free. So it's going to be one or the other. They're going to agree new deals for them, or they may sell them this summer.
I would keep Wilson on the basis that they still sign a third striker, but if you had to ask me now, sell Wilson, sign another striker, I would probably go along with that because of Wilson's injury record, and because Isak is such a star player at the crown jewels where he needs a reliable backup so you can get Isak on the pitch as much as possible. You can't have a situation like next season where they don't have that backup striker. No. Isak picks up injuries and comes as a detriment to not just the player himself but the full team as well.
I think, go back to the question in summary, I would say that I think everybody bought the crown jewels unless somebody comes in for Bruno. I think everybody bought those 3, I would say the 3 key, Bruno, Isak and Gordon, plus probably a secondary level, of course, Joe Linton having signed his new deal, Tonali being a new boy, so that's very unlikely that anything would happen in that. Livramento will probably be in that next bracket.
Yeah.
I would suggest probably anybody else in the squad. I may have missed a name or two, I'm not sure. I would suggest probably anybody else in the squad is quite, probably available. Botman probably isn't available because of the nature of the injury and the length of time he'll be out. Lascelles probably because of that as well. But I would have thought he would have been available. If anybody came in the same bracket that Jacob Murphy would be, and others that will form part of the squad next season, but if somebody came in with money, I'm sure the club would entertain it. I think there's probably a group of 6 that are almost untouchable, and 6 or 7, and then I think the rest is all fair game, and Callum Wilson falls into that category. What else are we talking about?
Trippier and
Almiron, I think Longstaff, I think they all fall into that. I think they all fall into in an ideal world you would keep them and keep them as backups, but in the PSR world Newcastle need it. And look, we've seen little bits of the numbers this week where a lot of talk of the new rules, etc. I think it's the devil is in the detail. I think if anybody wants to know our opinions on that, my opinion would be the devil's in the detail. We don't know the detail of what the new anchoring idea is. Do look on, we've all played football with the lads, Loden Mag there, Kieran Maguire on, who is the best football finance expert in the country, and he talked in depth, so do check out Loden Mag, you'll get a better explanation than you probably ever get on here. But my opinion on it is that I think it's too early to know whether that's a good, bad or indifferent thing for Newcastle United and any other clubs. Although a shift away from current PSR and the roll of the dice, it's something you probably can't be seen as a bad thing, in my opinion.
Ultimately, not a lot will change in that regard because you still have to adhere to the UEFA rules. So unless the UEFA rules change, nothing's really going to change, because if you want to compete at the top, you're going to be in Europe, and then you have to adhere to the 70% squad cost.
Well, that's the detail. So if the detail is suggested by some journalists who are much more abreast of these things than what we are, because that's their job on the nationals, the suggestion that there may be a relaxing of related party deals to do with sponsorship, that's the kind of rule change that would supercharge anything for Newcastle United, because it would allow the club to massively increase their revenues, which again would allow them to spend more in the 85, was it 80% and 70% of the UEFA rules?
85 and
85.
It drops after so many years, isn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, right, question 2. We're going to go back to
We've been doing 60 minutes.
This is going to be a long video, so strap in, we're in. Estimated transfer budget this summer. I actually think this will be I think this will be a question we'll probably go through quite quickly.
Yeah.
Because you never know.
Just estimated transfer budget this summer.
Right, it's going to be dictated by who they sell. I don't think Newcastle won't be going into this transfer window with a surplus of
doesn't look
transfer
like it, does it?
budget.
I think we'll probably actually, rather than go around all, you know, I think the same.
Exactly the same. Yeah, I think they'll have a budget, obviously, but then if you want to maximise that, you need to sell a player like this.
So my basic, this is very basic, Geordie Journomics. I look at last season and see the money that they had, and they only started to get stuck in the mud after the Tonali deal and when they tried to negotiate the Barnes deal. So that suggests last summer, without any sales, that suggests they were probably looking in the region of about 60 million to spend, plus sales, which then unlocked a lot more PSR wiggle room. If I was to be honest, given that they've boosted revenues, they've had a lot more TV this season, even though they've been on the TV less in the Premier League. They've had more cup games because of the Champions League and good runs in the 2 other cups, which they didn't have. I would think, obviously, the Adidas deal, the Seller deal, all that kind of stuff, that are good deals now compared to what on. I think it would be safe to assume they're probably on an even keel as to what they were last season, which is where I think your Almiron point comes from, that if you did an Almiron deal similar to the Maximum, could you go and spend the kind of money that you did last season?
Yeah.
This is guesswork, by the way. I'm not going to say I'm in the know with any figures or amounts. Look, you see the accountants online, and it does look like they're pretty close to the line in terms of PSR.
Yeah.
But I think using basic thought and common sense, you'd think, are they in a similar position to last summer?
What I would say, like they've got Lewis Hall fee.
Yeah, so that comes off automatically.
And then obviously the way PSR is calculated, which will change not next season but the season after. It's a 3-year rolling thing. The 3 years for this year, one of the years was under Mike Ashley, so now it will be 3 years pure PIF ownership where Newcastle have spent quite heavily, so it will actually have a knock-on effect in that way as well.
Sponsorship deals are boosted massively though, so you've gone from a 5 million
It's doubled your revenue.
30 million pounds, more than, and the Champions League money, what they made probably the best part of £40 million just off that alone. And obviously had a massive improvement in where they finished in the Football League, in the Premier League as well. So you think that would have a big impact?
Just hopefully they've got Lewis Hall on an 8-year contract for monetisation. That'd be good. Amortisation. I'm glad you got that correct.
We're not accountants, by the way. We're just average Newcastle United football journalists.
Average. Couldn't agree.
Well, I bring the average down. These guys are top class. I just bring it down with my waffle. Right, question 3. How many signings, in our opinion, do you think Newcastle United will make? Jordan, I'll come to you first. And let's have a quick fire one so this video doesn't run too long, because I'm sure people will want to.
We want to go to bed.
I don't know. Can we go for another pint? Over a pint?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a pint after
Yes.
this.
Another.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll have another yet, have
No.
we? Right. So, how many, Jordan?
So I would say without selling, I would go with 3. Is that low? 3 to 4. I don't know. That question stumped me. I
agree. I think even with sales, I think they'll sign 4 players.
They didn't sign many last summer.
It was 4 last summer. I think they'll do the same again.
Yeah.
I think they'll look to sign a biggie, a Tonali to like they did this previous summer with Isak. I think they'll sign another couple of others like Tonali. Livramento and Hall. I think they'll look in that market. I think they'll go and get one who dives straight into the first, or is the idea that dives straight into the first team, whether that be a centre half or a goalkeeper, even potentially, or a right-sided forward. I think it'll be probably one of those 3 positions. And then I think the others will probably scratch around a little bit, and if they can get some value, they'll jump in and sign a player like they did Livramento.
Well, I'm glad you jumped in there because I echo your thoughts.
Yeah, I think they'll sign a keeper, striker, and depending on who they sell, then maybe a right winger or someone like that, or maybe the
centre half
forward. Well, I think they might do a bit of free transfer business in that regard, yeah. So I think maybe 4.
My opinion on there's a lot of talk of I haven't mentioned many names or anything like that at the moment, but a lot of talk of central defensive names, and I hear Lloyd Kelly talked a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's got a good relationship with Eddie Howe, Tossin at Fulham as well. You know.
Yeah, I know who.
Don't ask me to pronounce his second name.
Don't jump forward if he's going to.
Adebayo or something like that.
I don't know him. You know who we mean. We'll maybe cut that bit out.
Probably.
Right. I think one of the things that's got to be mentioned about Lloyd Kelly for me is it does tick certain amounts of boxes. I'm very concerned by the amount of games that he plays and the amount of games Newcastle United require a player to play. I'm concerned by that.
Yeah.
Tossin, on the other hand, I think is a very accomplished centre half. I think you called it about 2 years ago, didn't you? Where you said
I actually wrote a piece on Newcastle World at the start of last summer to get Tossin in.
Yeah. Has his moments. He's not perfect, but well schooled at Manchester City and looks a decent player. So if they can do something like that, that almost frees you up. It would cost them a lot in terms of agent fees and probably inflated wages for a free transfer.
Yeah.
You have to look at Ryan Fraser and see that he's stuck on the wage bill for that. What free transfers can sometimes do to you. But I think if they can do something like that, I would edge towards Tossin personally, because I think he's a better. Well, I don't necessarily think he's a better player. I just think he's probably more reliable in terms of playing games, and I think they need that. I don't think they can have 2 centre halves or possibly out till Christmas if things don't go amazingly well in the recovery stage. I think they need somebody who's going to play and is going to be able to play, because Fabian Schär, we've seen, takes his knocks as well, although he always patches himself up, doesn't he? He always patches himself up.
Somehow, yeah.
Right, I think we covered that one off, didn't we? So the next question from Steve, 1887, and we'll do this for anybody else. If you guys want to fire anything in and it takes our fancy, we'll do a video like this again in the future. And do if you're enjoying this, give it a like and share it around. Are we targeting, we as in Newcastle United of course, are we targeting a striker regardless if Wilson is sold or not? And if so, what kind of strikers are Newcastle targeting? Dom?
I don't think they are.
Right.
If they keep Wilson, which Eddie Howe in an ideal world would probably like to do, if there was any sort of guarantee he would stay fit, which there isn't, but Eddie Howe has expressed that Callum Wilson's value to Newcastle is probably more than what any club is willing to pay for him.
Yeah.
And
He said that in the press conference before the weekend game, when he was almost like, yeah, you can let Wilson go, but it would take you a lot of money to replace a player of his quality. And I don't disagree with that, to be honest.
yeah, it's
I think
just
he
a player
makes
of
very
his
good point.
reliability. You could probably pay about the same amount you'd get from him, and then you've got a player who's playing more often.
So
But yeah,
frustrating with Wilson, isn't it? Like,
He's top class.
I look at him and you see,
he comes on Saturday, great finish.
if he played 38 games in a season, he'd be pushing 20 goals in the Premier League every season, even at his age. He's a top finisher, a good, big, strong striker who puts himself about and still got a yard of pace over a short, lesser than probably he did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He's changed his game slightly though
has.
as well, which I think is credible, because he was, when he first came on the scene at Bournemouth, he was just lightning off the shoulder. Now he's got a little bit of that in him, but he's very physical. He holds the ball up. He's almost like a focal point in the attack. So rather than just a pure.
No, you'd want
What's
him.
your-
And I think if Newcastle do keep him, they will stay as they are, because they've shown Anthony Gordon can do a job. Eddie Howe sees Anthony Gordon as a sort of third choice striker, if you like, in an emergency. You also mentioned Jacob Murphy, but I won't get on to that.
On Joe Linton as well.
Yeah.
Harvey
But
Barnes.
I think if Newcastle can maybe, if they were to sell Miguel Almiron, who's probably one of the more likely players to be sold, if they can get a right winger who can
also
maybe
do it.
play across the front three, then that's probably what we're looking at more likely. Or maybe like a young up and comer who's still got a point to prove.
So if we're going into names, one player that I've seen talked about a lot, I think it might have been talked about on Chronicle podcasts and a couple of others as well. I've seen it on social media this week, and he's a player I'm a massive fan of, and it's Brian Mbeumo at
He's
Brentford.
perfect.
He's
perfect
like
example.
he is perfect. He's not inverted, so he won't. Your plays as outside right, but he's quick. He scores goals. He can also play on the centre. He can play on the left. He's only 24. Doesn't look it, but he's only 24. I think he's perfect. Could you prize someone like him away from Brentford and somehow they're almost certain to sell Ivan Toney? That's probably a different conversation altogether. Depends on his contractual situation, but he's a level of player. I always like Neto at Wolves, who is the inverted. It's just injuries again. I mean, do you really want to go and pay 67 million?
Newcastle played Wolves twice this season. He's playing off both times.
It's just an excellent player that I couldn't commit to doing. I'm trying to think if anybody else has caught me eye in that role that I would maybe look at. And Buemo's the one, because I like these really athletic, quick.
He's your perfect Newcastle United summer signing.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say he'd have to be me main man.
I was thinking of a title for the video, and if you said yes, that would have been the title.
Do you want us to say yes? He's the man. That can be the title now. He's the man, and nobody will know who we're talking about.
He's the man, Newcastle United's perfect summer signing.
Yeah, I think for me, I know that we're actually. It's easy to get caught up in the emotion of how we've felt this season, and I think it is very, very relevant that we've felt a body short at times up in the forward areas.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually look at the team and just look at the stats in some ways and say, is that slightly short-sighted? You're looking at a football team who've scored more goals than they've scored in a long time,
yes,
and have conceded more goals than they conceded last season by some distance. So looking at those stats alone, I would say maybe. I know obviously Nick Pope's injuries had probably a larger say in that than many people thought before he got that injury, in fairness. But I would say defensive recruits is quite key. And although there's bodies in midfield, I do still have concerns that the players are quite right and the balance is quite right. I think if he can turn Miley into what I think he probably will become when he is a bit older, because he's got the size and stature, the vision and the passing, to become a player in the Rodri mould, sitting in that sort of deeper role. Do you need players with a bit more quality in and around? Because all it takes is Tonali and Joe Linton to be out again, and suddenly you're back down to academy graduates and relying on other players to fill in. So that would be my concerns rather than maybe the forward areas, even though I do think if you let Almiron go, you're probably still two bodies light on what you ideally want in those positions.
Yeah.
Shall we go to the next one? Can Yankuba Minteh?
He's that.
Is that?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know if it's Minteh or Minteh. I honestly no idea.
Well, I'll go.
You go Minteh.
I say Minteh.
I'll say
in the press
Minteh. We'll just call him different names on this
Can
one.
Yankuba Minteh? Doesn't sound right. Does it?
Enjoy that.
Doesn't sound right.
Minteh.
You don't come for the pronunciations of players.
No.
Especially not from me.
I've always told you this, and we'll all agree. If you come for the professional, you're in the wrong place.
We're trying to sustain some level of
We're off the
professionalism.
clock now. This is pure Geordie journalism.
Yes, this is, and this is what you like. Right? Can Yankuba Minteh be the right upgrade for next season?
No. And I don't mean that. I don't mean he'll never be good enough. But I just think Dutch League had some really good experiences there. It's almost took him half a season to get going in the Dutch League, by the way, because he was getting criticised a lot by the Dutch media until he went to the African Cup of Nations, and ever since he came back from that, he sort of hit the ground running. But without being disrespectful to the Dutch League, it's not exactly a top level league. But
It's a different kind of game.
But he's played. To be fair, he's had Champions League experiences. He's just won a cup there as well. I think it's been a very, very productive loan spell. But for me, I think he needs to go somewhere else next season before he gets looking at Newcastle. But to be fair, they might look at him in the summer, in pre-season, and he might take a different view. But just looking at it purely from what he's done in his career so far, I think he probably needs another loan before he's considered as a first team player.
Yeah, he does. The only caveat is sometimes, for whatever reason, 19-year-old young players can almost take the step up over a summer. So if he comes in and absolutely blows Newcastle United, Eddie Howe away in training, then for whatever reason he could do that.
Yeah.
But based on, like Jordan said, what we've seen of him, what he's done so far, he does need probably another year at least. He is 19, he's very, very raw. He's got bags of ability, bags of pace, trickery, all that is understanding of the game for what would be needed in the Premier League and what would be needed in Eddie Howe's side, where it's so micromanaged almost, and every player has a clear understanding of the role. You see, it's not a good example at the moment because they're not playing, but Kieran Trippier, Miguel Almiron. Kieran Trippier is in Miguel Almiron's ear the entire game. Kieran Trippier, if he's still playing next season, he wouldn't know what to do with Yankuba Minteh. For me, he'd lose his run.
So I'm going to slightly disagree with you guys in some respects, but largely agree. I'm not going to sit here and profess to have watched a whole lot of the Eredivisie and Feyenoord this season, but I did see a little bit of Yankuba Minteh in the African Cup of Nations, and he looked as raw as hell. He looked as though he had so much speed, it was incredible. Like, he was explosive in terms of his runs, but his delivery at times and his decision making was incredible, is how I'd put it. Like pinging from 7 yards, pinging crosses in that were head height at 800 miles an hour at people. It was like so bad decision making. Now, even with that in mind, I would look at the options that Newcastle United have had this season, and the people that they've had to turn to and look to, and had to pull back from loan spells, for example, from League Two and things like this. And why wouldn't you think, if we can keep this lad here? I know Eddie Howe's a big fan of keeping players around if he thinks they're of value and he can mould them. Just look at Lewis Hall; he's eventually starting to get bear some fruits of a year's worth of labour on that player. He's kept Joe White around because he sees something in him. Elliot Anderson's been around for the last 2 years, and we're only probably just starting to see that now. I think some of the players that we've seen and have been available in positions where Newcastle have been light, I think in some ways it's a bit of a no-brainer to keep him at the club next season. And he plays in the League Cup, he gets an opportunity off the bench for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes. He could be the type of impact player that really does bamboozle people because he is something different. And I think there's something there. I'm not saying he's going to be a Premier League footballer. I'm not getting amazingly excited about it because I've seen enough raw bits of his game to think he needs a lot of work. But again, you made a good point. He's been very good since he came back from the African Cup of Nations, and his levels have gone up. And I think the lad maybe needed that. He wasn't always a starter for his country as well in the African Cup of Nations, which probably tells you certain things about his level of maturity and experience as well at the moment. So I think I would roll the dice if you see enough in pre-season, of course, and we're not privy to any of that. But I think given the availability and how thin the squad has been at times, I mean, we even seen at Chelsea I think it was everybody got on. All the kids got on off the bench, didn't, and some of them
For the home game? Yeah.
Michael Ndweni, who was never going to have a future at Newcastle United this season and got on the pitch in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Could that place not have been taken by next season by Minteh, who has played in the Champions League?
Scored,
Yeah, so it makes you think like it's about levels for me, and who knows? We'll play devil's advocate.
Another talking point with Minteh is if Fine would come in and offer 20 million for him, what do you do?
It unlocks doors, doesn't it? So it's one of those that it's for me it's been the perfect loan. They pitched it really high, like they pitched him at a really high standard of football.
Like they just won the Dutch League, Champions League guarantee.
And he's gone there and he's actually made a really good impact. And so much so, that there will be clubs thinking, can we take him, even if can we get a 12, 15, 20 million pound bid in, could you get him? You maybe could. If Newcastle look at it and say, we'll have him in for 3 weeks, look, he's going to take 2 years of work to be anything like what we want in the team, they might cash in. It wouldn't be out of all realms of possibility. Right, there's a couple more questions on 36 minutes here. 36
Fair play for anyone.
Yeah, if you've stuck on this long, give it a like, give it a share, and you're probably already subscribed, but if you're not, please do. Last couple of questions. The second last one I'm going to skirt over. Sorry, Steve. Who are confirmed? So my transfer targets, there isn't any that we know of, but there will be some that are very high.
Well,
on
we've
the
touched
list.
on the ones that
the
Lloyd Kellys and
we know we're kind of involved in that conversation. Finally, the bit that we hinted at earlier, what will happen, and I think it's a question that a lot of people ask, is what's going to happen to Paul Dummett and Matt Ritchie? In your opinion, because we don't necessarily know the definitive answers, there are, these deals could be 95% certain on what's going to happen, but you still don't know what's going to happen between now and the end of the season, which could make a difference on these deals.
If you'd asked me this question a year ago, I'd probably say neither of them had a future at the club yet. Yeah, we're a year on, and I'm going to say the same thing again, but like you said, no guarantees. Matt Ritchie, he's what, 34, 35 now. He's done his bit. He's got his LGV license, so HGV license. HGV.
Be driving the team coach with?
Well, Eddie Howe played that down. He said it was too expensive, which I think
that was one of the key things to take out that press conference the other day, was when he said, I think he's too expensive for us.
Implying he's not going to offer him a new deal.
Well, we know he's on mega money compared to what, like the standard of where he is in the squad.
Yes.
And it will be incredible to see him stay on. And I see a lot of people talk about give him a coaching job, give Paul Dummett a coaching job. I don't know. I don't think it should always be a given that good players or experienced players at squad should automatically get those kind of positions.
Especially where Newcastle wanted it.
You want good coaches, never mind just jobs for the boys. But if they're good enough, I'm all for it. But for me, both gone.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for your service, but now's the time.
The one case with Paul Dummett, which we've heard do the rounds, I don't think you're a particular fan of this, but if you're in Europe, Paul Dummett is an extra body in the squad, and you could have him almost as, like, not in any other squads, as a reserve player, coach, playing in that. I know you're not a fan, but then he is an extra body, Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, whatever.
Does he do a job? Does one of them do a job? Matt Ritchie's too expensive, full stop.
Yeah.
Does one of them do a job as like you see these reserve coaches who play in the team, and there's a few randomly
Tom Huddleston.
Tom Huddleston, Man United, isn't he? Things like that. He's long past it. Tom Huddleston, how old is he?
37 or something.
Yeah. He's not been a player at any level for quite some time, I would say.
Well, Paul Dummett, I think it is, if he wants to stay at the club, I think that's probably his most realistic future if he wants to keep playing games at any sort of frequency.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think both players should leave.
Because they've had so many injuries in the defence, it's almost like, should you keep Paul Dummett? But in terms of ability, can you rely on when he comes on the pitch? I think he's a real professional, great servant. But yeah, I tend to agree that I think the time has has come.
I think there's got to be the end of the age of sentimentality among the Newcastle United fan base. I think for far too long we're far too nice with too many players, and I just don't think in an era of progress there's room for this kind of sentimentality. And I think it's thank you very much for your amazing service. You've been great servants to this football club. We love what you've done, but I'm sorry, now's your time.
Yeah, there's also a case of keeping that player's legacy intact. You don't want a player being wheeled out in almost just when he's so far past it. Not saying those players are, but you don't want it to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think it's approaching that point. If they were to leave this summer, they can leave with their heads held high as great servants, and history will remember them very fondly as Newcastle United players.
Right, that was a long one. I hope he's enjoyed it.
Is that it?
That is the questions.
Oh.
Thank you very much. What was his name again? Steve 1887. I haven't said it enough, but Steve 1887. Thank you. That was really interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed us answering your questions. If you like what we said, jump in the comments. We'll always, when I'm bored at night, I'll always jump on and start having conversations with you guys if I see any comments that I like, and I'm sure these guys do too. If you like what we did, let me know, because we can do more of this. And if it's what you guys want, the Geordie Journos will always deliver. Right, from Jordan, from Dom, and from me. You got Dom today, not your Sunday name.
I know.
This was your Geordie Journos. Like, comment, share, subscribe for all the content that you know and love.